And we are live. Good afternoon, America, and welcome to Carry the Loads Lessons from the Front. I am your host, Todd Boeding. This is the podcast that seeks to inspire us all to do just 1% more for our country in honor of the 1% who defend us from the bad guys. And today's guest is a guy that I've recently come to call a friend, even though he is Army, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But today's guest is Cole Morrison, United States Army Special Forces. And as I teased everybody with, he's got a unique perspective on part of the war on terrorism that a lot of people didn't even realize existed. So Cole Morrison, thank you very much for gracing us with your presence, sir.
Thanks for having me, Todd. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Let the jousting begin. So Cole started out, he went to the academy at West Point, otherwise known as the other academy, I think. I don't have a dog in that fight, so that's just what I will say. And then after you graduated there, 2010, went into the armor side of the Army. Is that correct?
That's right. Tanker.
A tanker, M1 Abrams, right?
That's death before dismount.
Before dismount.
Yeah.
And so now when somebody's in the on the armor side, is it only tanks, or could it be the Bradley fighting vehicles, or is that something different?
Yeah, that's the whole kind of internal dynamic to the heavy military, I guess. The Bradley fighting vehicle is typically the infantry guys, mech infantry guys, could be scouts though. So I was on the Abrams tank, so true armor guy, and then I was actually a heavy mortar platoon leader.
So a heavy mortar platoon leader inside. Now, why on earth would you be firing heavy mortars when you have that big howitzer on the front of the tank?
Yeah, that's it. I guess the over 4,000 meter range and some offset for the guys to get in. So it's actually an infantry role. So my first taste of infantry stuff was while I was still in first cav and technically an armor lieutenant still, but was an infantry platoon leader in the mortar section.
So I asked that kind of tongue in cheek, but the reality is, I mean, and obviously we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but for people that aren't aware, yeah, you have that big howitzer on the front of a tank, but if the enemy surprises you, they get a little bit closer. That's a very slow moving turret, and it fires way far. So you got to be able to defend yourself closer. Am I correct?
Yeah, for the most part. The mortars are used for offset fires and allowing tanks to get into position to where they have the fields of fire to engage. So that's the one thing with direct fire. Tanks are fast. I actually love the tanks, love the Abrams. It was amazing. We were on the newest models of them. But if you can't see it, you can't shoot it. And that's kind of what the mortars are there to do, kind of cover the blind spots in the terrain, to let those guys maneuver and get where they can shoot.
See, and I think that's the key. If you can't see it, you can't shoot it. But with a mortar, it goes up and down, and we know that you don't have to be able to see it to shoot it. So you went through the academy, you go into the infantry, you go into armor, and then you find your way into special forces. How did that happen?
That's right. I think timing is a big piece. I mean, ultimately, timing, I think, was a huge role in kind of where I went in my career throughout, and I feel fortunate to have been where I was when I was there. And the same thing. So I was in Iraq. I was in the last brigade to leave Iraq when we were closing that down, and not handing it over to anybody immediately. But there were special forces, two ODAs, operational detachments on our base, and one of the guys in my unit went to college with one of the Green Berets, and I played rugby at West Point. This guy was a rugby player. I believe
that's right. I
Kent
forgot
State.
We talked about that. Okay.
Yeah, and so we used to, obviously the special forces guys had all of the satellite TV, so we would go over there to their compound talk about training, get some training for my guys, but ultimately get to watch some rugby games, and just kind of saw the other side of the fence, literally and figuratively. And with Iraq being over, I came home and I told my wife, talking to my wife, said, hey, if we're staying, it's those guys are going to be the ones that get to take this thing, or get to do things, get to do, I think, some more fulfilling stuff. Obviously at that time, closing down a theater is not what you join the Army to do. So that was kind of the catalyst that made me come back and put my packet in for selection.
So when you were going into the special forces, I mean, like you just said, you shut down Iraq. And so you knew that wasn't going to happen. Was Syria even on your mind, or were you thinking, okay, I'm going special forces, I'm sure I'm going to end up in Afghanistan? Or did you know from the very beginning what was going to happen?
I think foreshadowing was not too hard to kind of see that Iraq was still going to be a playground for terrorists and terrorist groups and things like that. The area that I was in Iraq was more Shia Islam. It was actually Muqtada al-Sadr's home area, not Sadr city, but the whole province of where we were. Heavy Iranian influence and just a lot of turmoil there. So I knew something was going to, high probability was going to stay in that same theater. But yeah,
okay, well, hold that thought for 1 second, because a lot of people don't understand all the geopolitical aspects of it. So the area where you were in Iraq is much closer to Iran, I'm assuming, because you're saying it had heavy Iranian influence. And who was it that you were talking about a minute ago?
Al-Sadr. So you hear just I would say the kind of the Shia, or one of the Shia figureheads in Iraq. Okay. I guess, and his son also, and the influence there. So the power struggle in Iraq being between the Sunnis and the Shias, I think something, not to get too deep into it, something that we kind of underestimated and misplayed as far as U.S. policy in the Iraq War. Something people probably largely kind of accept nowadays. But seeing that there was going to be turmoil there, Iran is obviously still a U.S. Ally or major adversary, so to speak, and I just kind of knew that area was kind of the area that I wanted to continue working in. Afghanistan, 5th Group obviously has a history in Afghanistan as well, but since the Iraq War started, most of the 5th Group efforts have kind of remained, all the special forces groups being regionally aligned. 5th Group kind of stayed more true to the Middle East with as far as our kind of deployments of their focus.
So most everyone in America, if you ask them about the war overseas, they're going to be able, I mean, honestly, some of them wouldn't even be able to name Iraq or Afghanistan, but the vast majority would at least understand that we've been over in Iraq and Afghanistan. Not everybody understands what was going on in Syria. And you ultimately found your way, as you stated, shutting down things in Iraq, and then you went back into Syria. So first of all, how did that, I mean, when that happened, were you like, was it a surprise to you at all? Or were you like, oh yeah, Syria, that's been on our minds?
Syria is the spot. No, I think it's just a bigger understanding the region. Sykes-Picot, that is still something we mentioned after World War I. The Allied forces drew all the borders. It really comes into play in what I saw, fighting ISIS with alongside the Kurds. The Kurds are an ethnic group that span Turkey, Iran, Syria, and Iraq. But the borders aren't representative of the actual issue. The geopolitical issue is more religious based there. So kind of seeing Syria, Iraq, anywhere in the Middle East, it's just where is the point of influence for, or the decision point, or the point where we're going to put efforts behind for some geopolitical advantage. And Iraq and Syria, when you put it that way, when you look on the map too, it's largely the same. It's the same Euphrates River, and it's the same kind of desert terrain there. And no coincidence that Syria is where ISIS formed and launched their attacks back into Iraq as well.
Interesting. And that, I think you really kind of summed it up when you stated that, we have a tendency to look at a map. We, meaning the American culture, the Western civilization, we look at a map and we look at the boundaries, and to us, it makes perfect sense that that's where, that one country's fighting, with another because of that boundary. And you're right. It has nothing to do with political lines that, as you so adeptly pointed out, were drawn as a result of World War II, World War One. But actually, it's more, like the Kurds, they don't understand any of those boundaries. In fact, they probably, if you asked them to point it out on a map, they wouldn't have a clue, because that's not the world that they live in. So I think that can kind of speak to the not the arrogance, but maybe the ignorance of our culture, understanding their culture when it's all said and done. So did you see any difference in the wind down of Iraq, where you served in Iraq and what you did in Syria? Was it the same thing? Just now you're in special forces?
Yeah, I think the tables turned a little bit. Iraq, obviously, we were there for an extended period of time. We had conventional forces owned all the territory, and when you have that, when you're in that environment, the counterinsurgency environment, special forces, special operations units operate within and on someone else's ground. Typically, we don't own the terrain, so to speak. We are targeting, and Iraq was very much that way. When I was there as the conventional unit, we were keeping roads open, doing standard things, but we had, each army unit drew it on the map of what they owned, what they were in control of. And then when we left, I think you kind of reset the game. No one's in charge anymore. There is no more territories held by the US. And when we went into Syria, there was no conventional forces. And I'd say I left Iraq in 2012 or December 11, January 2012. And I was back in Syria, or I was in Syria for the first time, in 2016. And my first experience there was different, not only from the mission standpoint, but there was no other US military personnel there. And you could definitely see it if someone did recognize that we were Americans, that they had never seen Americans before. So the reaction from I would say a war weary Iraq and an occupation weary Iraq from just American soldiers and their big armored vehicles and the intrusion there in general, just kind of tired of it, but they're familiar with it. In Syria, it was all brand new. They weren't familiar with Americans. They weren't familiar with people being from outside, not from Syria being there. And so it was just a totally different feel.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to that here in just a second, because that's an interesting point of clarity. So first of all, you mentioned insurgency and counterinsurgency a minute ago. To the layman who doesn't really follow military history, current events, anything like that, how do you describe insurgency and counterinsurgency?
I will loop them into one in kind of one thing, but an insurgent or an insurgency warfare is tactics, techniques, doing things to impact the enemy that aren't kind of face to face, to put it as simple as possible. You want to do things sabotage or behind, underground, and not able to confront your enemy face to face.
So guerrilla warfare, if we want to look at it in our history, and we look at how we had to fight the American Revolution, it was a lot of insurgency. I mean, although they couldn't avoid, for sure, some of the face-to-face.
That's a great thing, and that's where special forces came from in World War II, getting people that spoke the language and had unique skills, and they were jumping into France behind the lines, the Jedburgh teams, and building up the locals to resist, to do things, to sabotage the rail lines, to impact the Germans, to kind of facilitate the future success of the kind of open war, the conventional type of battle. And obviously that's difficult to fight. So, when we go into Iraq, when we went into Afghanistan, even though those were largely, Afghanistan was special forces initially, we're able to clear large portions of land, large swaths of land from the enemy, because that's kind of where we can dominate. It's when it's how big is your gun type of warfare. And then as soon as you clear it all, as soon as we took all of Iraq, or as soon as we, and we bring in our army bases and we're in occupation type, then the enemy is still there. And that's when they talk about the 360 degree. It's a different type. You're looking for, the targeting is different. You're not pushing a front line anywhere. Your objectives are human based and not ground based or land based.
Interesting. Okay. So human based. So when you get into Syria, and you go, as you stated, you go from Iraq, where all these people, they know exactly who you are. They know why you're there. They may be tired of it. They may be ready for the next step in this whole process. But now you get to Syria, where these people don't have a clue as to who you are. As far as as far as they know, you're from Japan. You look very different. So how did they accept you? And I guess before we even go there, let's talk about what led us there. The leader at the time, al-Assad, there was a civil war going on. I'm going to let you take it from there. How did we end up in Syria to begin with?
Yeah, that's it. I'll probably get sharpshooters all over my history and my definitions here, Todd. But
I warned you it was coming.
So I know. So 2014, I think there was a civil war in Syria. Assad, he's a different sect of Islam. He's more pro-Shia. He aligns himself more with Hezbollah and Iran than the other local Sunni powers. Turkey being a big one, their neighbor to the north, a member of NATO, their religion is Sunni Islam. And so Assad's struggle was he was oppressing his people and wanting to align and establish basically the Shia area, Shia Crescent, and connect all those and people that kind of started the uprising against that. He turned on his own people. So the Syrian government was fighting against I think at the time, or what they originally were called themselves, was the Free Syrian Army. And they were really just fighting for kind of the right to vote. I'd say democracy, probably a very loose form of democracy, but anything other than his authoritarianism. And that was going on at the same time. So that is in Western Syria. At the same time, U.S. forces and the primary part of Iraq, we hear a lot about Mosul and Baghdad. Those are more Eastern Syria. And throughout the years in the war, Al-Qaeda and all these members of these Sunni radical groups had free passage and freedom of movement into and out of Syria. So as Assad focused on his own people in the civil war, it created a massive power vacuum in the rest of Syria. And ISIS was able to ISIS, I think, was just a distillation of the other Sunni groups and who could be the most extreme. They took the most extreme ideologies. They fought other Sunni groups that they said weren't radical enough or weren't conservative enough to their beliefs. And they really took that and were able to capitalize on Assad not looking, not paying attention, take Raqqa, the major city in the middle of Syria, and establish their own government. And from there, very quickly, in a matter of less than 2 years, decide that they had enough power to go and invade Iraq and get beyond Mosul with large victories over Syrian army and claiming swaths of land there, and the Iraq army. And ultimately what they did, to keep the long story short here, was they claimed the caliphate, which is in the Quran, as the land that is, God's land, so to speak, and controlled by Muslim leaders as it's dictated, and it's going to be this Islamic utopia, so to speak. And they did that all in a matter of 2 years because there was no one paying any attention to them.
And that leads us to our hero of the story, and you and the others that ended up there. So Army Special Forces essentially was inserted at that point to begin some disruption. Is that a fair way to put it?
That's a fair way to put it, for sure.
Okay. And so these people now, going back to what I was asking about, these people that they have no idea where you're from. They just know that you're not from there. How did they accept you? Did they accept you with open arms? Was it with tempered enthusiasm? How were you viewed by them?
Tempered enthusiasm is a good way to put it, I would say, Todd. It's, we were, we don't go in there. We're obviously 12-man teams on ODAs, and talking about the sector, our focus that we were, the area we were in northwest Syria, was you have to have a force, a local force, in order to multiply. You can't multiply by 0, right? You multiply by 1, you still got the same thing. So you have to have other people. So really, the task is to build for us, is in order to defeat ISIS, we need someone that wants to defeat ISIS, and we're going to help them and enable them to do that. And finding those people, largely in that area, and I won't get into the kind of the bureaucracy or the political stuff with how we do that, but a lot of the people that we ended up with were Free Syrian Army guys that I mentioned earlier, who had been fighting Assad and realized weren't doing well, weren't having great success. The barrel bombing on civilians and the tactics he decides to use didn't help that. And so we kind of became their best chance of success, defeating ISIS first to clear that area, and gave them the best chance to ultimately succeed in taking their homeland back. ISIS was just as bad as Assad, and different, they just didn't really mix in the same area. So a lot of the folks we worked with were very happy to see us, but I think the tempered part was ultimately their goal was, beyond the ISIS thing, and US policy was ISIS focused.
Yeah. And when you look at something like that, that just starts to really speak into the complexities of a geopolitical landscape that is infused with a tremendous amount of religious divergence. It's just, to the average American, they look at it and they go, oh, it's easy, just go kill the bad guys. Well, but it's not that simple, because the bad guys have different alliances with these good guys over here, because they have a different need from ours, but yet we're still allied with them. It can go on and on. So, what you're talking about is has to make it really difficult when it comes to you doing your job as an American, because you have a responsibility to take care of your troops and accomplish the mission. But man, the mission gets watered down in a hurry, doesn't it?
Definitely.
I shouldn't say watered down, but it just gets real complex.
For sure. Yeah. And multiple ways to describe it. The training and the history of the special forces and what we go through, actually surprisingly does a great job of preparing us for how to approach the problem. It's not how to solve the problem. So if you know how to frame it, if you know how to approach it, and my team was the most experienced and talented 11 guys dragging 26-year-old Captain Morrison around. But just the way that we can approach, and every man knows it. It's everyone is an expert on what's going on, and we really, every day, it was like solving the calculus problem of today at this point in time, who is on our side, who are we with, and tomorrow you can't take for granted that is going to be the same answer the next day.
Yeah. Okay. So what you just said, man, that just opens up all kinds of boxes to me. You said that the training you went through from a special forces standpoint. Now, you even said your word surprisingly had you prepared for this. And one of the things that I don't think people understand is that, the military, as it relates to, the gunfighters, is a far more intellectually and educated, intelligent aspect of the military than people think. Because, like you said, I mean, you have to understand the religious side of things. You have to understand the political side of things. You have to understand, most importantly, the human side of things. And why did you choose the word surprisingly, though, that it prepared you for it?
I was probably surprisingly was directed more at the sheer complexity of the problem set. And we would the fact that we had a base to start on, we had that we could at least have a framework and define it and go at it each day. You wouldn't think that that's in a manual or in an experience in the schoolhouse. We equated it and referenced some of the special forces, like Q course training, qualification course training. One of the culminating phase there is called Robin Sage, and we just kind of joke, like, this is a Robin Sage scenario. This is where they want you to fail, so they throw all the complexities in, and at the end of the day, you figure out how you should have gone about solving the problem. They never tell you the answer, and they'll never tell you the answer, because there is no right answer. The right answer is what gets you through the day, or what gets you to the objective. And we just kind of took that approach and had a team that was like I said, just rock stars, and could sit there, and any guy on the team could break something down or bring a piece of perspective in, and you hit the human thing. That was overarching from start to finish. We're talking friendlies, enemy, talking civilians, NATO allies, even, whatever. It was all really just beyond. If we can take religion and set it aside, everyone that we fought with, everyone that we fought against, and our NATO partners were all Sunni Muslims. So you have to take, like, the easy thing off the top. No one's wearing any uniforms, no one's identifying themselves. So you got to take that off the top. You have to really break it down to who are they, what's their motivations, and to make it even more complex in that environment. Not everybody works for the same group every day. So the fighters in any one of those, any given scenario, like I said, friendly or enemy, they're moving around the battlefield, not very clearly. So I was surprised. I think looking back and reflecting on it, surprised at really how prepared each of us were, each of the guys on my team were, as being able to articulate and define and chew away at that complex problem set every day, and ultimately, had success and were able to do what we needed to do.
So, honestly, I could go on and ask you all kinds of questions about this all day long, because this is the fascinating side of the lives that we've lived. But is there anything in particular from your time in service, or your time in Syria specifically, you go with it where you will, that really stands out with you to this day, that really left a lasting impression on you?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll frame it a little bit. We were talking about the human thing there, talking about the complexity. So our mission was to go in northwest Syria and take the homeland away, the city that ISIS declared in the Quran. It's where Armageddon happens. There's a city, it's an area in northwest Syria called Dabiq. It was the name of their magazine. And in the Quran, Dabiq is where Islam stands against the infidels for the last stand. And our objective was, relatively straightforward, take it from them. And here's, less than 30 guys and partner force, and go do it. So all that and everything moving there, and you can imagine how fast it moves, and who we're with, and we're enemy focused. We don't know who our friendlies are. We don't really know if we trust our partners at all. And one of the things that just kind of kept, I think it continued to motivate us, and we got instant feedback, which I think in longer war you don't really get. But we would take a town from ISIS. We'd have success, and it may be a good day, it may have been a tough day. There, who knows what happened. And at night we'd sit on these little anthills or on the roof of our house wherever we were going, and you could just watch streams and caravans of families with all their worldly possessions, their sheep, their children, all their, everything, and they're coming back in to move back into their house, free of. And ISIS was a terrible, very oppressive rulers. You couldn't, cigarettes is like one example, or these things. But if you got caught breaking any of their rules, they were vicious. And so we would come in and take it, and the people just couldn't wait to get back to their homes and go back to how Syria was. And so we would basically fight all day, and then at night just watch life go back to normal for these people, back to their farms and their houses. And that was something that just really resonated with us. Like, these are the people we're helping. Special forces is our motto is De Oppresso Libere, to free the oppressed. And I would say very rarely has anyone got to experience on a daily basis seeing those people be free and enjoying it and hearing them, in between fighting over and over.
Okay, so hold on. There's a lot to unpack there. So,
yeah, I get it.
Okay, so you guys are in country. Let's just kind of try and draw up a visual here for everybody. You are moving from south to north, and you are looking to kill the enemy. I mean, let's face it, that's the job. But the enemy that you're trying to kill is in a village that has oppressed and displaced all of the people who actually call that home. This is what they built. It's been passed down from generation to generation in some cases. And you guys go in, you kill the enemy, you send them running, and then you go back on your anthill, as you call it, and are literally watching these people who are displaced return home, certainly in sheer glee that they get their life back. Did I get all that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And
took me so much longer to say it, Todd.
Well, hey, I read the Cliff Notes and everything in high school, so I know how to get there. But what's cool about that, like you said, a lot of times you can't see, the fruits of your labor, so to speak, but you actually got to sit there and watch that happen. How gratifying was that you got to witness what your very motto speaks to?
Yeah, like I said, that was if anybody ever needed any more motivation to do our job, I don't think anyone was short on that during that. And there were some tough times with with that deployment. That was our first of three, or first of two together as a team, and I think it really motivated us, pushed us, and kind of we could subsist as a 12-man team anywhere for however long and however bad of conditions, because we knew, and we had that with us, that we were freeing the oppressed, we were being successful, and we were saving people.
Okay, so I've got two thoughts on this. No, number one is, did you ever get to interact with these people when they came home, when they returned to their home, or did you just keep moving in the next direction?
We did a little bit. It was limited, I would say. I mean, like you said going back and go. We actually, if we wanted to stay somewhere, we couldn't really stay. I guess we could not stay somewhere for more than a couple of days, or they would come knock on the door and ask us, "Can we come back to our house?" So you're looking at like a special forces team and everything we have going on, and each time we'd say, "Yeah, I mean, sure, I guess we'll move on." And so we got some limited interaction there. We always stopped and bought food and kind of traded, and to try and kind of see what we could learn from it, what's going on, and understand, because obviously tens of thousands of people coming in behind you as you go deeper into enemy territory is something that you definitely want to have a pulse on and understand what's going on. So we engaged with that, but never too much. I think
So
most of them probably never even knew who we were.
they just knew that the bad guys were gone. They don't necessarily they may have heard rumors, they may have heard gunfire because they were probably somewhat off in the distance, but maybe close enough to hear that. Okay, so now the bad guys are gone. We're going to go check it out. Hey, our home's free. We're going to go back. All right. Well, tell me about okay. So you kept mentioning a 30-man team, but your team was only 12, which meant the people that you weren't even sure if they were really supportive of you or not, that you're fighting alongside of shoulder to shoulder, they actually outnumber you. So when you guys get together and there's 30 of you, how many ISIS are you going up against at any one point in time?
Yeah, 30 is just a random number. As far as my team was the 12-man kind of team, a standard special forces detachment with our partner force. And our goal was to obviously always have enough partner force to outnumber ISIS. But I mean, we were taking towns and cities away from ISIS, and large elements, I would say, dozens of fighters, if not more, with never more than, as far as on our U.S. side, just one team of guys. The interesting part, the dynamic part, is a nice way to put it, would be we were organizing these groups collectively. They're Free Syrian Army, or they're a group from somewhere else. Some of them are more established groups. Some of them groups just show up, and we, talk about being as students, and knowing the area and knowing the groups. Is someone shows up that's not on our payroll, for lack of a better term, or not a partner force, and actually is there looking for Americans for a fight. And we always had to understand that. So about 12 US guys and hundreds of our own partner forces, or so we think, and large numbers of ISIS all at the same time. So it was really a game of, or a lot of focus on blending in to, even with our partner force, or not looking like Americans, not being easy to find, and never being kind of conveniently located.
So did you make it through each deployment with the same 12 guys?
We did. So first of all, like, all my guys made it back from both of the deployments. We had very little turnover. A couple of guys went on to bigger and better things between the first and second trip. But yeah, I think we took 10 out of the 12 same guys on the second deployment.
But
Just
not
normal
because
rotation. Yeah, just normal rotations there. We had some
that's
guys a couple guys get injured from the group, not from my team.
that's pretty impressive though.
Yeah.
I mean, is it just me, or is that unusual?
Um, for Syria, I think I think will be a case study in success and on special operations, special forces tactics going forward. I think the sweeping success against ISIS, and in a relatively short period of time of 3 to 4 years, of from them claiming the caliphate, like I said, until there's no more caliphate at all. They own no land anymore. That was a relatively quick thing, and very low numbers of U.S. casualties there. We did obviously in Syria have U.S. casualties, but very few, and never had any or very many forces in Syria at all. To have, I think the total number is north of 50,000 ISIS fighters removed from the battlefield, for lack of a better term. So sweeping success in a complex environment with all that going on. With
Why do you suppose that was? I mean, because you're right, those are some phenomenal numbers that you're throwing out.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's a big testament to the professionalism of the units there, and not saying anything about conventional units. There were SEALs, there were Marines. We let them come in every once in a while into Syria, so just so we could say that they were there. Just so,
so now to draw it a little more.
So bring it all the way back. Yeah, we even let the SEALs, and they couldn't mess it up, so we were still fine. No, I think it's the professionalism of the community, the special operations community writ large, the ability to go and operate and influence and to be effective and building trust with a partner force. That is not, my partner force was not the same as the Kurdish forces, the Syrian democratic forces that are our largest partner over there against ISIS. So it's much, I just think much more efficient, and people understood and knew how to, I think, kind of work together and work quickly and keep things going.
God,
we never sit down and let things come back around. I'm not sure how it is, now, obviously, but we always had, I think we're able to keep our foot on the gas and keep momentum moving in Syria from start to finish.
Well, and that's one of the things that we talk about in training at an infantry level is speed kills. I mean, it can kill you or it can kill others if used properly. But one thing for sure, speed kills. So, man, what an interesting conversation, Cole. I mean, because now, for a couple of people that know us, they thought we were going to talk about the actual joke that I put out there, 2 Green Berets, 2 SEALs, and a Marine walk into a bar and then, tune in to find out. Well, and just to let people know what was funny about that, and our executive director, Debbie Wright, got to ride along with us all. And it was me and you and another Green Beret friend of ours and 2 Navy SEAL friends of ours. And she couldn't stop laughing because of all the jousting that was going on, back and forth. And of course, as the lone Marine, I was outnumbered as always, but I believe I held my own. So I'll just leave it at that.
That was a, great trip. I mean, a great introduction to Carry the Load for me. I obviously Cody introducing me to the organization and being a SEAL. And then the first guys I meet, Navy SEALs, and then in Utah as a Marine, I'm like, oh man, this could be rough. And then we kind of got it lined out, got the numbers balanced out a little bit, and it was a great time.
Yeah, everybody determined whose tree was whose, and hey, you stay over there on yours, and
I won't say the obligatory Todd in the backseat eating crayons joke. I'll leave that out. But no, I think, and I always thought that way. And to kind of bring it all the way full circle, one of my best friends and rugby teammates from West Point was a Navy SEAL, became a Navy SEAL from West Point, and switched over. And we seemed to always be in Iraq or Syria at the same time. And so there was, imagine the banner there, adjacent kind of areas there working. And
he was confused, wasn't he?
He was confused for sure. He'll actually, I think he'll say like he went to West Point because he didn't get into the Naval Academy. So that's pretty funny. But, and then being over there in a MARSOC platoon commander comes up to me, and I have hair not quite as great and long as your hair.
Let everybody know what MARSOC is.
So Marine Special Operations Command, Marines, a Special Operations platoon in Syria, working for the Green Berets and our task force. And the guy walks up to me. I have a beard. I have long hair. We don't wear name tapes on uniforms. Very subdued. And he looks at me and he says, did you play rugby at Army? And I'm kind of taken back, like, yeah. And he was a guy who was a midshipman at the Naval Academy, and we played each other in rugby a couple times. So the community is just, tight from kind of, I think, start to finish, and bonds are established on multiple levels there. And so it's always fun. I love cutting up. I told the guy I was going to give him vehicles, but since he went to the Navy and he wanted to bring that up, then he needed to walk home after that. So
they must have beat you in rugby, so you must have still been sore about that.
Not quite, but it's great. I mean, and like you said, like you're set up there, the 2 SEALs, 2 Green Berets, it was a great time, and a Marine, obviously, it was a great time, great trip.
Well, to kind of round it out, tell me what you took away. I mean, if there's one thing that you're gonna, that you're really gonna remember from your time in Syria or your time in Iraq. I mean, that you think is a great life lesson to pass along to others. Could you sum it up in any way?
I think if I was trying to sum it up into one thing, I think it's really just the human piece is so important. Caring about people at the human level is and understanding people at the human level is even as military guys fighting wars, I think people would be amazed at how much human you know interaction, human level care there is, not just from within the fort, the services, but across the board for the civilians, for everyone around. So I think that's the one thing that I definitely took away from it, from all the experiences that we had, that really resonated with me and still does.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, whether it's here or there, people they just want to live. They just want to live. They want to go to their home and they want to live. I mean, that's, my father's actually been in the hospital for a couple of weeks, and at the end of the day, that's all he wants. He just wants to go home. He wants to be at his home. He doesn't care about anything else because, that's his safe place, just like those people that you were talking about. So, Cole, thanks for sharing all that, man. And you've now had the opportunity to get to know Carry the Load, and you know what it's all about. So if I were to ask you, who are you carrying, what would your answer to that question be?
Yeah, so primarily John Farmer. Chief John Farmer was one of the guys, one of the U.S. Green Berets killed in Syria, and wear it on my wrist every day. He was from my battalion, and a good friend and wonderful human being, and that's who I'm carrying.
Fantastic. Cole, thank you, my friend. It's a pleasure to see you again, and I've got some other things to talk to you about offline when the time is right. But I appreciate you giving us your time today.
Thanks, Todd. Enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
And for everybody out there, thanks for joining us. The next episode I'm looking forward to this one as well. I get to interview a Marine sniper. His name is Brian Marin. Feel free to go out and research him. He's got some really good stuff out there. He's doing great work in the community still. That's on Tuesday, October the 5th. And I want to remind everybody, as always, have a very good question to that, or a very good answer to that question. Who are you carrying? So for everybody at Carry the Load, my name is Todd Boeding, and I am carrying Captain Rick Gannon, United States Marine Corps, who actually lost his life, interestingly enough, at the Syrian border. Who are you carrying?